Hello and welcome to a new video on cryptography for everybody in the Basics of Cryptology series. In today's video, we will discuss security goals of modern cryptography. I structured this video into different parts. In the first part, we will look at the so-called Kerckhoffs Principle. And Kerckhoffs Principle is a principle for security. And it's quite old, it's from the 19th century, but still valid today. After that, we will have a look at modern cryptography security goals. And we have 4 different security goals: confidentiality, data integrity, authenticity, and non-repudiation. And we will have a look at all of these. As with all of my videos in the Basics of Cryptology series, we know that cryptography is the art of making ciphers and cryptanalysis is the art of breaking ciphers. And you probably know this tree here, and in this tree we see which parts of cryptology we will have a look at this in this video here. And today we will discuss cryptology, cryptography, modern cryptography, and what we discuss applies to symmetric and to asymmetric cryptography. At first, let's discuss the Kerckhoffs Principle. And this Kerckhoffs Principle is very important for classic, but of course also still for modern cryptology. Auguste Kerckhoffs wrote 2 articles in 1883 about cryptology. And in the first article, he developed 6 principles, where principle number 2 is the famous Kerckhoffs Principle. And you see all of these 6 principles here. Some of these principles are now outdated, you will see what I mean later, but many of them are still valid today. The first Kerckhoffs principle is the system must practically, if not mathematically, indecipherable. And this is also a principle we want to have or want to achieve for today's modern ciphers. And then we have the second Kerckhoffs principle. And as I said, this is the principle that is named after Kerckhoffs. It's the Kerckhoffs principle. And it should not require secrecy, and it should not be a problem if it falls into enemy hands. And with it, of course, it's ciphers are meant, or cryptographic systems. And this is a very important principle. And many people developing ciphers or who developed ciphers did not obey this principle. They kept the cipher secret, and this ultimately led to not finding flaws in their ciphers, and the ciphers were broken. So when we develop ciphers today, we should not keep anything secret, and the secrecy or the only thing we should keep secret is the key. Then the next Kerckhoffs principle is it must be possible to communicate and remember the key without using written notes, and correspondence must be able to change or modify it at will. Here 2 things are important. And I start with the last important thing, and that is that you have to be able to change or modify the key at will. And I think this is quite important because a cipher with a fixed key does not make any sense. If the key is part of the cipher and someone finds out the key, then the cipher is not secure at all. And then the principles tells us that we have to communicate and remember the key without using written notes. I think this is not so important with the written notes today, but this more or less today refers to usability. So when you use ciphers or encryption techniques, the usage should be easy. So it should be possible for everyone without cryptology knowledge to use a cipher. Then the next Kerckhoffs principle is quite interesting, and it says that it must be applicable to telegraph communications. In that time, in 1883, for Kerckhoffs it was important that these ciphers could be used for telegraph communications. Clearly today we do not use telegraph communications anymore, but maybe we could say that it has to be applicable to internet communications in our days. Then he says that a cipher must be portable and should not require several persons to handle or operate. And I think this is also important with respect to usability. You don't want several people encrypting your messages when you want to write an encrypted email, for instance, today. But in the past also, it should have been possible that only one person operates a cipher. So this also refers to usability. Yeah, and then the last Kerckhoffs principle. Lastly, given the circumstances in which it is to be used, the system must be easy to use and should not be stressful to use or require its user to know and comply with a long list of rules. This also refers to usability, I think, and of course, modern cryptology should be available to everyone and should be easy to be used for everyone. So this is also important for today's cryptology. So even that these principles are more than 100 years old, they are quite important for today's cryptography. And in every course or in every lecture about cryptology, you will hear from Kerckhoffs Principle, which is Kerckhoffs Principle number 2. It should not require secrecy and it should not be a problem if it falls into enemy hands. Now let's come to modern cryptography security goals. And classical cryptography's goal, or the goal of classical cryptography, was always only to secure the content of a message. But clearly with modern cryptography we have more security goals, and with modern cryptography or with information security we have 4 goals. The first goal is confidentiality, the second goal is data integrity, the third goal is authenticity of data origin and of entity, and the fourth one is non-repudiation. And what all these goals mean, we will see on the next slides. Clearly, there exist additional modern security goals, for instance, availability or access control and others, but these goals are not part of this video. We will have in this video a look at these 4 main security goals for modern cryptography. So let's have a look at the first security goal, and that is confidentiality. And as I said, confidentiality is not only a goal for modern cryptography, but also it was always a goal for classical cryptography. And with confidentiality, the content of a message should be secured such that only the intended receiver is able to read it. And now we can question ourselves, how can this security goal be achieved? And the answer is encryption. We use encryption algorithms to achieve this security goal. For instance, today we use the advanced encryption standard AES to encrypt the content of a message. And only the intended receiver is in possession of the used key to decrypt the message. This allows us to achieve confidentiality, encryption of our data. Now we have a look at the second goal of modern cryptology, and that is data integrity. What does data integrity mean? With integrity, the content of a message should be secured against manipulation. That means it is not possible to remove, change, or add information to our message. And with only encryption, this is not possible. For instance, when you encrypt a 200 byte long text and you have a block size of, let's say, 20 byte, then of course you could just remove some bytes from the end of the encrypted text and no one would notice, since they will not see that, or they do not know that there are some bytes missing. And for that we have to achieve integrity. And how can we achieve this security goal? And the answer for that is cryptographic hash functions. A cryptographic hash function computes a fingerprint of our data, and when we compute this hash value of the data, for instance, we hash the plain text that we want to send to a receiver, and of course we encrypt it after we hashed it, and the receiver receives the ciphertext, he decrypts the text, and then he computes from the plain text the same hash value, or he computes a hash value. And if the hash value that we also encrypted and sent to him matches with the hash value that he computed, then he knows that there's no data manipulation, or that there was no data manipulation. And today we use, for instance, SHA 256, so secure hash algorithm 256, for securing the integrity of a message, as I have just said. And as I said, a hash value of the plaintext is computed and appended to the message. When the message has been modified, the receiver's computed hash value and the appended hash value do not match. This is how we achieve data integrity. Now we have a look at authenticity of data origin and of entity. And with authenticity, the sender of a message should be clearly identifiable and his authorship should be verifiable. So that means that when we receive a message, we clearly know who sent us this message. And some people also think that this can be achieved with encryption. But a small example, Alice encrypts a message and sends it to Bob. And now Bob and Alice share the same key. Having a message could be encrypted now by Alice or Bob, so we cannot identify the sender of the message. It could be either Alice or Bob. So encryption alone does not achieve authenticity. And to achieve authenticity, we use message authentication codes or MACs and asymmetric cryptography to create signatures. And HMACs are an example that are used to authenticate the sender of a message. And HMACs are hash-based message authentication codes. An HMAC usually consists of a cryptographic hash function and a secret key known by sender and receiver. And also RSA, for instance, can be used to sign a message using the private key of the sender. Now let's have a look at the last of our security goals, and that is non-repudiation. And non-repudiation means that the sender of a message should not be able to dispute his authorship of a message he created. So that means when Alice received a message from Bob, she can detect that this message was from Bob, and when she detects that the message was from Bob, Bob cannot dispute his authorship of the message. And how can this security goal be achieved? And to achieve this security goal, we use digital signatures. For instance, RSA can be used to sign a message. We had a video already about RSA on this channel in the Basics of Cryptology series. So if you're interested in the details of RSA, you should have a look at this video. And since we assume that only the signer is in possession of his private key, so Bob is the only one who owns his private key, the receiver can now prove that Bob signed the message with his private key, since we can use Bob's public key to verify the signature. And since we know that the signature is valid and Bob is the only one in possession of his private key, that he is also the creator of the message. The only thing that could have happened is that someone has stolen Bob's private key, but in that case, Bob should notify everyone that he got rid of his private key and he has to create a new one. So to achieve non-repudiation, we use signatures or digital signatures, for instance with RSA. Now that we know the four main security goals of modern cryptography, I thought it would be nice to have a look at techniques for confidentiality, integrity, authenticity, and non-repudiation in CrypTool 2. I'm here now in CrypTool 2 and I want to show you at first how to achieve confidentiality. And as I said, to achieve confidentiality, we have to encrypt our message. And today, with modern ciphers, we use AES to encrypt a text, for instance, or our message. And I searched here in the template section for AES, and we have our AES cipher here. And with this template, we have an example text. This could be our message to Bob, for instance. And this message then is converted to a CrypTool stream here. Our AES component here encrypts the text, and then a second encoding component converts from binary data to hexadecimal data. And then here we have our ciphertext. So when we press play, then we get our encrypted message. On the left side here below, we have the key. I think I'm in the way of that, so I put it on the right side and get rid of this. So once again, we have here our cryptographic key, also in hexadecimal format, and we have our ciphertext. And now when we are the intended receiver, we should be in possession of that key. So we can copy our message here. We change this to hexadecimal and this here to text. And when we decrypt it using the correct key, I should change this to decrypt, then we get back our message to Bob. And clearly only Bob is in possession of the key. If there is someone, for instance, with a false key, then even the padding is wrong here, meaning we cannot decrypt the message here. So to achieve confidentiality, we use AES. Now let's have a look how to achieve integrity or data integrity. And for that, we have hash functions. And I think I use SHA1 for that. We have some templates for that, I think. Yeah, here we have SHA1. So when we have our message here, hello Bob again. I think I will increase the size here. We have here our SHA component. We can change this to SHA256. And then we get, when we press play here, a nice fingerprint of our data. So when we send this data to Bob, we would create a message. I use Notepad for that. We would at first append or add to the message our message. Of course, you have to think of now this here is encrypted, but I right now only put the plain text here. And then we have our hash value. And this together should be encrypted. This would be our encrypted message. Now on the receiver side, the receiver would use or would decipher the message. He would copy hello Bob into that text input here or in his application. Then he would also press play here or would execute the SHA256. He would get the same hash value. We can compare these here, 4848, 73 and so on. And the receiver would see, okay, this message has not been changed. Now let's assume someone changed the message and changed it to hello Alice. Now when I press play, I received hello Alice here. And since the sender or since the man in the middle or someone who wants to attack us changed the message, I would copy hello Alice here, would compute the hash value. We now see here F6, E9 and so on, but we received the hash value of the original message. So we see the hashes are different. There has to be a change in our message. That means that our message is the integrity of our message is broken, and we know that there is someone who changed the message. Maybe on purpose, could also have been an error, but what we would do in, for instance, modern cryptographic protocols, we would ask again, please send the message again, and if this happens more than once, for instance, and the next message has also been changed, we know that there's someone changing our messages. Now let's have a look at the next security goal, and our next security goal is authenticity. And for authenticity, we use, for instance, RSA. And I think we have some nice templates for that. For instance, Rsa Encryption here. So in the authenticity works a little different than encryption. Instead of encrypting a message here, we would sign a message. So that means instead of, as you can see here, I encrypt the message here. I would not encrypt the message. I would take this message here. Then I would add an SHA, for example, here, SHA component. And this SHA component then computes the SHA value. Then to sign the message here, we would not use the private key because the public key, because the public key is used for encryption. We would use the private key here, and we can connect the private key here, and then we can add our signal or our hash value here, and then when we press play, we get a nice fingerprint using the hash as a hash value, and this fingerprint then, this hash value, is signed using our private key. And now to check the signature, the receiver would also take the message here, he would compute the hash value, and he would use this received, this here is then our signature, And to check the signature, we also need a second RSA component. Then we need the public key here. And of course, we need the N value of RSA. And we need a text output. Then we have here hash of message, signature. And here we should have also the hash of message. And we have to change here to decryption. And now when we press play here, as you can see, we have our message here. We compute the signature here. And then the signature, which has been created using the private key, for instance, of Bob, can be checked using the public key of Bob by decrypting the signature. Then we get this value here. And as you can see, this value is the same value as the hash of the message. And since we know that only Bob is in possession of his private key and he signed the message, we know that this message here is from Bob. So hello Alice from Bob. And we see here that here we have the signature and here we have the here we have the signature and here we have the decrypted signature, which also gives us the hash value of the message. And this is how we can achieve authenticity. Since Alice knows that this message can be only or has been sent by Bob, and since Bob is the only one with the private key, he has to be the sender. And this also helps us to fulfill our fourth requirement or our fourth property for security. And this is the non-repudiation. And since we know also that Bob is in possession of this private key, and when we decipher the signature with RSA using the public key of Bob, we can be 100% sure that this message is or has also been sent from Bob, since no one else is able to create the signature here. So RSA helps us to achieve both security goals. The first one is the authenticity, so we know from whom the message came. And the fourth security goal is that Bob cannot deny that he created the message here. We can achieve both with RSA. So RSA is really a nice algorithm. Yeah, and this is everything that I wanted to discuss with security goals. As I already said, we have 4 different security goals for modern cryptology or for information security. That is confidentiality, that is data integrity, that is authenticity, and then non-repudiation. And we can achieve all these security goals with the help of ciphers, hash values, symmetric and asymmetric cryptology, and signatures. Yeah, and this is, as I said, everything I wanted to discuss in this video. I hope you liked it. If yes, please give a thumbs up. If no, you know what to do. Give the thumbs down. Also, if you did not yet subscribe to this channel, I would be really happy if you do so. This really helps me to grow the channel, to make CrypTool 2 more popular. So, thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video.